My name is David, and I am 34 years old. I live in Minneapolis, a city that can be beautiful and brutal all at once, especially when winter truly settles in. For years, my daily life was a rhythm of quiet persistence. I woke up before the sun, usually around 4 in the morning, and took 2 buses across town to my job as a cleaner at a large office building downtown. My work was honest. I pushed carts full of supplies, emptied countless trash cans, and scrubbed floors until they gleamed. There was a strange kind of peace in it, seeing the building go from empty and dark to bright and ready for the day's hustle. I worked hard every single day trying to build a stable life, trying to keep a roof over my head. My biggest dream wasn't fancy. It was just to have a small place of my own, somewhere warm and safe. But more than that, my dream was for my younger sister, Sarah. She's 20 now, in her 3rd year of college, studying to be a teacher. Our parents passed away when we were younger, and I became her guardian, her big brother who promised to always be there. Her future was my North Star. My quiet struggle, the one I kept hidden even from Sarah, was the loneliness that sometimes pressed in, and the constant fear that I wasn't doing enough, that I was failing her. That doubt, that internal nemesis, whispered to me late at night, telling me I wasn't smart enough, strong enough, or good enough to truly make a difference. It told me I was stuck, just pushing a cart in circles while the world moved on without me. Then the world really did start to close in. The rent on my tiny 1-bedroom apartment went up again, a huge jump that I just couldn't afford anymore. I tried everything. I cut back on groceries, walked everywhere instead of taking the bus, but it wasn't enough. The numbers just didn't add up. I knew I couldn't ask Sarah for help. She had her own bills, her own dreams. So I made a choice, one that felt like a punch to the gut. I gave notice on my apartment. I couldn't bear to tell Sarah. I didn't want her to worry, to feel like she had to drop out of school. For a while, I slept in my old car, a beat-up sedan that smelled faintly of old coffee and desperation. I parked in different spots each night, trying to stay hidden. I got a gym membership just so I could shower. The cold was the worst part, seeping into my bones, even with blankets piled high. When the snow started to fall heavier, I knew I couldn't keep doing it. That's when I started staying at the Harbor Hope shelter a few nights a week. It was clean, warm, and the people there were kind. Still, the shame burned hot in my chest. David, the big brother who promised everything, was living out of a shelter. The internal nemesis grew louder, mocking me, telling me I was a complete failure. I kept trying. I picked up every extra shift I could at the office building, working nights, even weekends. I found a second job, delivering food for a local restaurant, which meant long hours driving through the increasingly snowy streets of Minneapolis. I was exhausted all the time, my body aching, my mind foggy. But I focused on Sarah, on her tuition bills. Every single penny I earned went towards saving up for her next payment. I never missed sending her her monthly allowance, even if it meant I went without food for a day or two. But then came the setbacks, one after another, like a row of dominoes falling. First, the delivery job ended suddenly when the restaurant decided to cut costs. Then a week later, my old car, my only shelter and my link to my jobs, broke down for good. The engine just stopped, right in the middle of a snowstorm. I had to pay for it to be towed, and the mechanic told me it would cost more to fix than the car was even worth. It was a complete disaster. I had to use Sarah's tuition money, the money I had painstakingly saved, to cover the towing and a few nights at a cheap motel just to escape the freezing cold. I felt a knot of panic tighten in my stomach. I was behind on her tuition payment, way behind. When Sarah called a few days later, her voice thin with worry, asking if everything was okay, if she needed to drop a class because her payment hadn't gone through, my heart shattered into a million pieces. I mumbled something about a delay, a bank issue, but the lie felt hollow. I could hear the disappointment in her voice and the fear in mine. I had reached my lowest point. It was late December, just a few days before Christmas Eve. The city was a wonderland of twinkling lights and festive cheer, but to me it felt like an icy prison. I was sitting on a hard cot in the Harbor Hope shelter, the noise of other people a dull drone around me. My clothes felt thin against the biting cold. I was so hungry my stomach ached. Looking at my worn-out shoes, my empty wallet, the knowledge that Sarah was struggling because of me, it was too much. The thought of giving up, of just disappearing, of letting the city swallow me whole, was a powerful pull. I pictured myself calling Sarah, telling her I couldn't do it anymore, that she was on her own. The shame was suffocating, the fear paralyzing. What was the point of trying if every single effort led to more failure, more heartache? But then, the unexpected happened. It was Christmas Eve, freezing cold outside, probably 10 degrees below zero, and inside the Harbor Hope shelter a new kind of cold began to creep in. The heating system, the old boiler that usually hummed along, sputtered and died. First it was just a chill, then the air became visibly frosty. Panic started to spread among the guests, especially the mothers with small children who wrapped their little ones tighter in thin blankets. I felt a surge of helplessness, but also something else, a desperate need to protect. Even though I was at my lowest, I couldn't stand by while others suffered. I tried to help the shelter staff, looking for extra blankets, trying to keep everyone calm. The staff had called every repair company in the city, but it was Christmas Eve, and no one was available. Just when it felt like all hope was lost, around 8 o'clock that night, a battered white van pulled up outside. An older man, bundled in a thick parka with a kind, weathered face, stepped out. He was an anonymous HVAC technician named Mark, he said. He had been called by a dispatcher who had begged him to come out. He worked tirelessly for hours in the freezing boiler room, his breath fogging in the air. I watched him, amazed by his dedication. He didn't complain, he just worked. At one point, he looked up at me, noticing I was helping by holding a flashlight. He said, "You have good hands, son. You're trying to help even when you're cold yourself." His words, simple as they were, hit me hard. Someone saw me, truly saw me, not just a failure. Around midnight, a triumphant clank echoed through the shelter. The boiler roared to life, and within minutes the blessed warmth began to fill the rooms. A wave of relief washed over everyone. Mark refused payment from the struggling shelter. He just smiled, wiped his hands, and said, "Merry Christmas." As he was leaving, he saw me shivering, still wearing my thin coat. He paused, looked at me with those kind eyes, and said, "Hey, I'm heading downtown. Can I give you a lift? You look like you could use a hot coffee." I nodded numbly. In his warm truck over a steaming cup of coffee at an all-night diner, I found myself pouring out my story, the shame, the fear for Sarah, everything. Mark listened, nodding, never judging. When I finished, he just looked at me and said, "You have a good heart, David. And you're a hard worker. I could use an extra pair of hands for odd jobs, helping me carry tools, cleaning up sites. It won't be much at first, but it's honest work and it's steady." That act of unexpected kindness, that leap of faith from a stranger, changed everything. I started working with Mark a few days later. It was difficult at first, learning a new trade, working with my hands in ways I wasn't used to. But the steady income, the rhythm of work, and Mark's quiet mentorship slowly began to rebuild me. He taught me about boilers, about furnaces, about plumbing, about how to fix things. More importantly, he taught me that I had value, that I was capable. I got a small room in a boarding house, finally a place of my own, somewhere warm and safe. I was able to send Sarah all her tuition money, and she thrived in her studies, never knowing how close I had come to giving up. I started saving again, slowly, steadily. I learned a trade, became useful, and felt a sense of purpose I hadn't known in years. I never forgot the kindness I received. I started volunteering at the Harbor Hope Shelter on weekends, sharing my story with new guests, helping them find resources, offering a listening ear. I paid forward the warmth and hope that Mark had given me. Years passed. The cold winters of Minneapolis came and went. David, the cleaner who slept in his car, became David, the skilled HVAC technician. I had my own small business now, my own white van, just like Mark's. One Christmas Eve a few years ago, I received an emergency call. The voice on the phone was frantic. It was the Harbor Hope Shelter. Their boiler was acting up again. As I drove through the snowy streets, a profound sense of gratitude washed over me. I remembered that night so clearly, the freezing cold, Mark's kind eyes, the turning point in my life. I arrived, seeing some familiar faces among the guests, and quickly got to work in the boiler room. I fixed it, just like Mark had done, and just like he had, I refused payment from the struggling shelter. As I was packing up my tools, a young man, clearly down on his luck, with tired eyes but a spark of quiet determination, offered to help me carry my heavy toolbox out to the van. I saw in his eyes a reflection of myself from all those years ago. We walked out into the silent, snowy Christmas Eve. I offered him a hot coffee, just like Mark offered me. Then, sensing his struggle the same way Mark had sensed mine, I looked at him and said, "You know, I could use an extra pair of hands for odd jobs. It's honest work and it's steady." The cycle of kindness continues, proving that even in the coldest nights, hope can find a way to warm the world.